Welcome to Activate Your Introvert, a podcast for intrapreneurs and business leaders tackling the 33% productivity gap due to ignorance of introversion, helping you unlock more productivity and creativity so you get a better business. Selling is something that most introverts hate the idea of, and whether you're a business owner or simply need to sell your ideas to friends, sales skills are essential. So I'm really pleased to interview Ben Kench this week. Ben is the UK's #1 sales and business growth specialist. He's author of the UK's best-selling sales book, Selling for Dummies, and creator of the Business Booster, which has added literally millions to hundreds of businesses in the last 16 years. And just before we start, if you would like to talk to me about issues raised in this podcast or others relating to introverts, please visit introvertinbusiness.co.uk. Welcome, Ben. Great to have you here this week.
John, great to be here. Thank you so much for asking me to share a bit of time, because it's a passion of mine to help people in business, and selling is a sticky point, to be honest, for everybody. In answer to your question, my wife, Kirsty, is the only person that really knows me, and she would tell you that very often there's the frantic paddling of duck legs under the calm surface. And as with many people, the appearance of a completely confident, completely natural, completely extroverted person, actually, in many private situations, I am a private man and I'm the one at the back of the room. So there is, in me, certainly, an element of introversion.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm kind of guessing that having written the UK's best-selling book, Selling for Dummies, having helped all these businesses to grow, if I said to you, before we even get any further, what's the biggest ever sales tip that you'd give a business owner? What would it be?
People buy people. So I'm banging the drum, standing on the stage, writing books about really being more human and authentic, and take the label of selling off and just with integrity serve your fellow man. I believe that whilst selling is a label and it is a skill and it is important, people put too much emphasis possibly on the label, and more specifically on their interpretation based on past reference of what that label might be. To anybody listening, I would say, if you can make great friends and you can be authentic and honest with those friends, and in those moments you can talk freely with those friends, so those friends like you. Selling is persuasion, getting people to like you. So you're already a bloody good natural at selling. Forget the label. Take what you do brilliantly with your friends. View every prospect in business as a potential friend, and be like you would with your friend.
Love it. Thank you. But why is it introverts in particular, although I'm going to guess lots of people don't like having the label sales, as you've just said, why might introverts not like selling?
I think if we so let's just stand back and reflect on the image that we have of that word and the actions of that word. Our image would, in all of us, stem from times gone past when some people wearing that sales label would take advantage of and prey upon the ignorance and situation of someone to sell them something. It doesn't happen so much now. Thank goodness we have freedom of information. We've got technology. It's much, much harder for someone to use the word blag, but someone to pull the wool over your eyes, so you don't need to be so threatened by a salesperson. So it's different playing field. However, we are afraid because we have a residue and a memory and image in our library, in our head, of past days where selling was predatory, made you feel uncomfortable, and very often you lost out. So it's completely understandable we have a negative image of the word. However, it's absolutely critical to understand that you and selling now do not in any way have to represent the image that you've got in your head from the past. Selling is about persuasion and, in my book, service. And that means you care about people, and in their world, you give them what they need. You don't have to be a certain style anymore. It's about the customer, not you.
Brilliant. Oh, I love that. Thank you. So I guess what you're saying is that people tend to have this thing in their head, as you said, generated from years gone by when they met a salesperson they didn't like or something. And it's about dumping that and getting on with being a real person.
Yeah, and I can promise you, John, and you'll see all over my LinkedIn posts and my love for fellow man, love for a genuine outcome. Love says if it's good for you, it's good for me, not if it's just good for me. And if you shift that energy from what do I get to is this good for both of us? And when you walk into any businessy type meeting with the mindset of, I only want this to be right if it's right for you, so you tell me about you. Two things that really, really pivotal with that. Firstly, the sensory awareness of your prospect. They know that your energy isn't threatening, so they welcome you more and listen more. And secondly, if you're genuinely trying to find an outcome that's right for both, then you'll approach it with better questions that really uncover their world way before you start blabbing on about your world. Selling isn't telling.
Okay, now that makes a lot of sense. And again, some of that is playing to introvert strengths. So you mentioned listening, which introverts tend to be good at. Asking the right questions. Are there good questions to ask when selling, or are there bad questions?
So in sales training, and certainly in years gone by, we have an awareness in the language of English where you can be direct. Do you want to buy it? Or you could go to the side and say something like, can I assume then that, John, that if this was absolutely right for you, you'd be happy to have it? And the sideways question is no threat. You don't mind hearing that because the sideways question has a caveat right at the beginning of the question. It says, if this were right for you, John, which softens it for John's ears. So he's happy to say, yeah, if it's right, I don't mind. And that's much less threatening than, so John, do you want it?
No,
So definitely the style of the question is a skill, and anyone can learn to reframe a sentence. That is a selling skill, yes. But ironically, most extroverts, and again, we'll say stereotype, and I don't want to negatively frame any person, but the stereotype image is a salesperson that's so full of his own stuff that they don't really care about the person. And so they don't frame good questions. They just steamroller in. Introverts that care and ask good questions, with a bit of practice, we can restructure those questions. You get far more mileage.
Frame the question up, perhaps with the caveat up front. If this was good for, would you be interested? Okay. And
key, John, always. The question about emotions. I know that we can't go into this today, but all of us, introvert or extrovert, male or female, religious or non-religious, doesn't matter. We all operate by an emotional center. How do we feel? If we feel threatened, if we feel nervous, if we feel in any way not comfortable, we will back off. And therefore, the sales process has to nurture a good feeling and get the prospect to come forward. And the best way to do that is to just say, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about your current situation? If it's wrong, how badly is it wrong? Would you like it to get better? And how do you feel about it getting better? If you keep asking that, how do you feel? Subconsciously, they open up the emotional link, and that is the best trigger for them to purchase.
As long as it's done with love for fellow man. You mentioned process. Is there a sales process? Give me a really the skinny on sales process, as it were.
So great question, and clearly, John, every business has a slightly different structure: business to consumer, business to business. Sometimes it's product based, which would have slightly less variation than service based. But in essence, your process needs to be taking them down various stages of a buying process. The buying process is what's important here, not you as a salesperson. That person in front of you may well be in a rush. That person in front of you may well have certain timeframes and budgets, and things can't be speeded up. That person in front of you might need to bounce off 3 other persons, or they might be the one that says, I want to do it and I want to do it now. So critical to every process is finding out first about them. And if your selling process is customer focused, finding out with good questions their situation, their level of pain, their level of budget, their level of urgency, then actually the rest will take care of itself, because they will tell you in that first half an hour, and that first hour, they'll tell you what they need.
So focus on the feelings, focus on what they need.
Yeah. Selling, ethics and morality, and as I said, love for fellow man. It's never right to sell something if they don't really need it. Finding out what they need and want first is the only ethical process.
A couple of quick questions. We've only got a few seconds left, Ben, but one of the ones when I talk to people, they say, how do I tackle the price issue?
You know, interesting about money. Money's always a bigger issue in the mind of the salesperson than it ever is in the mind of the buyer. And it's an internal, your comfort zone. If you, as a person in business or a person, if you're not comfortable with money, it will show in your pricing. And that's a whole subject in itself about how to price well. However, if there is an objection to a price in a selling situation, number one, categorically, critically, every time, number one, an objection is to be expected. If you're not getting objections, they're not seriously interested enough. You're not got a deal anyway. Brilliant. No buyer anywhere, if they're half serious, will do it without any objection, because they just got to feel like they struck a deal. So if you're not getting objections, you've not got interest, you've not got a deal. Secondly, when they do object, it's only a fear reflex or a process in their own psychology. They are saying to themselves, I've got to put up a fight, I've got to get a deal, or I can't just lay down and buy. They've got internal language. So they're reacting to that with a, well, it's too much. Can you do a deal? I can't buy it at this price. The first time they say that, you go, yeah, no, absolutely, of course, yeah, I'll come back to that. Scoot around it. A fear objection is not a real objection. And you can overcome objections because you just then question it. So if it's a money objection and you say to me, John, well, Ben, I think it's a bit too much money, or it's a bit expensive, or it's a bit more than I thought, I'll say, that's fine, John, no problem. Now, if it comes back up in conversation 10 minutes later and you say, yeah, but Ben, this is a bit more money than I thought, I'll say, oh, okay, John, okay, so not a problem. Out of interest, just because you mentioned it, more than you thought, what was it you thought it would be? Oh, well, I didn't really know, but I didn't think it'd be that much. Oh, well, if you didn't really know, how did you have an awareness of what you thought it would be? Well, so John, can I just ask, I don't really want to get into a debate, but did you have a budget or a physical constraint, or is it just that we've got to get the right solution and maybe payment terms are more relevant?
Like the switch.
Because it's never about price. It's always about, really, do they believe it's going to give what they want? And if you and I, here's the thing, acid test, have you ever bought something you couldn't afford? Yes. Every man, woman has. So it's not money. It's only the fact that they can't quite see where the benefit is, in which case you've got to improve your selling process. But price itself is not price. It's, I've only got £1,000. Fine. So if I took the £1,000 now and you paid the other 500 next year, that would work for you, wouldn't it?
So kind of quickly wrapping up then, Ben, there's no good or bad sales type. There's a lot about, you said about love for fellow men and genuinely looking for something that's good for both parties is the 100%. Primary place to start with. In the process of selling, or you're working with the buyer's process, not your own process, asking how they're feeling about things.
Without a doubt, if you just pause in your head and think of the image of a salesperson, and that stereotype image instantly for most of us brings up a negative. Therefore, for most people that you ever meet, the sales label is a negative. Introverts, because they don't demonstrate the physical outward traits of that negative stereotypic image, instantly, an introverted type, calmer type, methodical person will get more mileage in selling than the stereotype salesperson anyway.
Fantastic. That's a really good point to end and a very good reminder. Ben, I'm sure that some of the people listening might well want to get back in touch with you. How would they do that?
Best place is find me on LinkedIn, and that would be linkedin.com/Ben Kench. And certainly you could find me at benkench.com, and you could email me ben@benkench.com.
Ben, thank you very much. Been really good talking to you. Some great
pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Activate Your Introvert, and I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. I'd love to see your reviews on the iTunes store. Thank you once again, and catch up with you next week.